Wyoming Territory, 1873. The wild grasslands stretched endlessly beneath an enormous sky, indifferent to the struggles of those who sought to tame it. For 25-year-old Roderick Taylor, the vastness of the frontier only amplified his conviction that a man was better off alone. He had learned early and painfully that attachment was a luxury the West did not permit for long. The land takes everything eventually, he often muttered to the wind as he worked his modest homestead 15 miles outside of Painted Rock. The small ranch had been his sole focus for 3 years now, a plot of land purchased with savings from his cowhand days and the meager inheritance his father had left. Roderick rose before dawn, his lean frame moving with the efficiency of someone who had no time for leisure. His light brown hair fell across his forehead as he splashed water on his face, revealing features that might have been called handsome if they ever softened with a genuine smile. His eyes, the color of a storm-threatened sky, surveyed his property from the cabin doorway. One small barn, a corral, and fields that needed more attention than a single man could give. What he needed was cattle, specifically a milk cow to start. The lonely bachelor existence had taught him self-reliance, but even he admitted that journeying to town for every supply was becoming impractical. No attachments, he reminded himself as he saddled his buckskin gelding. Just a cow. Get in, get out, get home. This was the mantra of a man who had watched his father wither away after his mother died of fever, who had seen strong men reduced to empty shells when wives and children succumbed to the hardships of frontier life. The West was no place for a family man, no place for love. The ride to Painted Rock would take most of the day. Roderick packed lightly, carrying only what he needed for the journey, plus the money saved for purchasing the cow. A good milk cow would change everything. Fresh milk, butter, perhaps even cheese. Small comforts that made solitude more bearable. What Roderick didn't anticipate was how profoundly his simple errand would challenge everything he believed about survival in the unforgiving West. The town of Painted Rock had grown considerably since Roderick's last visit 3 months prior. The railroad survey teams had brought an influx of workers and opportunists, swelling the population and bringing both prosperity and trouble. The single street was busier, the saloon louder, and the trading post better stocked. Roderick tethered his horse outside Henderson's general store, nodding curtly to passing townsfolk. Inside, he found Frank Henderson arguing with a weathered rancher. "Taylor," Henderson called out, clearly relieved for the interruption. "What brings you down from that isolated patch of yours?" "Looking for a milk cow," Roderick answered, removing his hat. "Heard Matthews might have one to sell." Henderson shook his head. "Matthews sold his last heifer yesterday to that new homesteader family." But, he lowered his voice, leaning closer. "There's something more interesting at the edge of town. Group of Apache came in this morning to trade. Peaceful bunch, got permission from Sheriff Wade. Among them is a young woman, mixed blood, they say. Her mother was white, captured years back." Roderick frowned. "What's that got to do with my cow situation? Word is they're looking to find her a place among her mother's people. She speaks English, raised between two worlds." Henderson's eyes gleamed with gossip. "They've got horses, good stock. Maybe trade possibilities there. I need a cow. Frank, not complications." Henderson shrugged. "Just saying. They're camped by the creek. Might be worth looking into for trade goods, if nothing else." Roderick left the store irritated. The prospect of returning home empty-handed after a full day's ride grated on him. At the livery, he received the same news. No milk cows available for sale anywhere in town. Cattle drive coming through next week, the stable hand offered. Could wait. But waiting meant another journey, more time away from his homestead. Cursing under his breath, Roderick found himself riding toward the creek despite his better judgment. Just to look at the horses, he told himself. Nothing more. The Apache camp was small, 3 lodges and a handful of people. Roderick approached cautiously, aware of the tension that often existed between whites and natives. A middle-aged man stood as he approached, watching him with cautious eyes. "I come to trade," Roderick called, stopping at a respectful distance. "Looking for stock." The man nodded once, gesturing for Roderick to dismount. As he did, movement near the nearest lodge caught his eye. She emerged into the sunlight, and Roderick felt as though the air had been pulled from his lungs. She stood straight and proud, 19 or 20 at most, with features that spoke of her mixed heritage. Her dark brown hair fell in a single braid over her shoulder, contrasting with the simple calico dress she wore, a curious blend of white and Apache styles. But it was her eyes that held him, deep amber with flecks of gold, regarding him with neither fear nor submission, but quiet assessment. "I am Ayana Morgan," she said in perfect English, her voice clear as mountain water. "You seek horses?" Roderick realized he was staring and quickly removed his hat. "Roderick Taylor. Actually, I was hoping for a cow, but I'm told there are none to be had." Something like amusement flickered across her face. "No cows here, Mr. Taylor." The older Apache man spoke to her in their language, and she listened, nodding occasionally before turning back to Roderick. "My uncle says we have good horses. We trade for supplies." She hesitated, then added, "I can help translate." For the next hour, Roderick found himself examining truly exceptional horses while engaged in the most unusual conversation of his life. Ayana moved between English and Apache effortlessly, explaining that her mother had been taken during a raid 15 years ago, eventually becoming the wife of a warrior. She had died the previous winter. "My uncle believes I should know both worlds," she explained as Roderick inspected a particularly fine pinto. "My mother taught me to read and write English. She wanted me to have choices. And what do you want?" The question slipped out before Roderick could stop himself. Ayana's eyes met his, startling in their directness. To belong somewhere, fully. The simple honesty of her answer struck something within him. Wasn't that what everyone wanted, deep down? Even a man who claimed to embrace solitude? As the trading concluded, Roderick agreeing to return the next day with goods to exchange for the pinto, the older Apache man spoke at length to Ayana. Her expression changed, becoming first surprised, then thoughtful. "My uncle has a proposal," she said carefully. "He says you live alone on land." Roderick nodded, suddenly wary. "He proposes I go with you. As wife." Roderick nearly dropped his hat. "I what?" "It is our way sometimes. He sees you are honorable man. I need place among white people. You need woman to make home." "Miss Morgan." Roderick stammered. "I came to buy a cow, not to find a wife." Her face remained composed, but something flickered in her eyes, perhaps hurt, perhaps resignation. "Yes, of course. You need not answer now. Tomorrow, when you return." She turned to go. "Wait," he called, not understanding his own reluctance to end the conversation. "Your uncle would truly send you with a stranger?" She looked back. "Not stranger after today. And I am not child to be sent. I choose my path." She studied him for a long moment. "Come earlier tomorrow. We will speak more." That night, Roderick barely slept in his rented room above the saloon. The very idea was preposterous. He had built his life around independence, around needing no one. A wife? An Apache wife? The complications would be endless. Yet he couldn't stop thinking about her eyes, about the quiet strength in her voice when she spoke of belonging, about the loneliness of his cabin that he pretended not to notice. "Madness," he muttered as dawn broke. Complete madness. Nevertheless, he found himself riding back to the creek earlier than necessary. Ayana was waiting, as if she had expected him despite his internal protestations. She wore the same dress, but had adorned her braid with a small blue flower. "Walk with me," she suggested, and he found himself following her along the creek bank. "Your uncle's proposal," he began awkwardly. "I should explain. You built your home alone," she interrupted. "You keep to yourself. The storekeeper says you never come to town except for supplies." Roderick frowned. "You asked about me? I needed to know what man my uncle suggests for husband." Her directness was unsettling. "Why do you live alone, Roderick Taylor?" "Because it's safer," he answered before he could stop himself. "The frontier takes enough without adding more to lose." Ayana considered this. "My people know loss well, yet we do not choose to face it alone. It's different, is it?" She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "My mother was taken from her home. She lost everything. But she built new life, found new love. When she died, my father's grief was great. But he said to me, I would not trade the pain now for never having known her." The words struck Roderick like a physical blow. Wasn't that exactly what he had been doing? Trading any chance at connection to avoid potential pain? "You don't know me," he said finally. "Why would you even consider such an arrangement?" "I stand between two worlds, belonging fully to neither," she answered simply. "My mother's people see me as Apache. My father's people see me as white. I seek place where I am simply Ayana. And you think that place is with me? A stranger? I think, she said carefully, that two people who understand loneliness might build something true together. Not romantic fairy tale, but partnership. Respect. She paused. Perhaps, in time, more. Roderick stared at her, struck by the wisdom and pragmatism in her words. This was no starry-eyed girl, but a woman who had considered her limited options and made a rational choice. I need to think, he said finally. She nodded. Yes, think. But know this. I do not offer myself from desperation. I choose my path. If you say no, I find another way. The confidence in her voice only made him more intrigued. Throughout the day, as he completed the trade for the Pinto and gathered his supplies, Roderick found himself watching Ayana. She moved with purpose and grace, respected by her people, yet somehow separate. She caught him looking once and met his gaze without embarrassment or coquetry, just that same direct assessment. By evening, he had made his decision. It was impulsive, completely contrary to his careful nature, and yet somehow felt right in a way few things had. If we do this, he told her as the sun began to set, there are things you should understand. My homestead is small. Life there is hard, especially in winter. I am not afraid of hard work. The nearest neighbors are miles away. Town is a full day's ride. I have lived in more isolated places, she countered. People will talk. A white man and an Apache woman. People always talk. She smiled slightly. Is this you saying yes? Roderick took a deep breath. It's me saying I'm willing to try, if you are. Not as husband and wife, not at first, but as partners. To see if what you suggest could work between us. Ayana considered this, then nodded. Partners. Yes, this is good beginning. The journey back to his homestead took 2 days. They traveled with the Pinto, a pack horse loaded with Ayana's few belongings and additional supplies, and a profound sense of unreality that Roderick couldn't shake. What had possessed him to agree to this arrangement? Yet as they rode, he found himself oddly at ease with her presence. Ayana was not a woman who felt the need to fill silence with chatter. When she did speak, her observations were thoughtful, her questions intelligent. She noticed things about the landscape that even he, who had traveled this way many times, had missed. On the second evening, as they made camp within sight of his homestead, she asked a question that revealed how much thought she had given their arrangement. What will you tell others about me? Roderick paused in building the fire. The truth, I suppose, that we met in Painted Rock and agreed to a partnership. Some will think you have taken advantage. Others will think I have trapped you somehow. Her eyes reflected the first flames of the fire. People see what they expect to see. What do you expect to see? He asked, curious. In this partnership? She considered the question seriously. A place to belong. Work that matters. Respect. She looked up at him. And you? Honestly, I'm not sure. I never planned for anyone else in my life. He added more kindling to the flames. But I know I'm tired of talking to myself. The honesty made her smile, a real smile that transformed her serious face. Then we begin with that. The next morning, as they crested the final hill and his homestead came into view, Roderick saw it through new eyes. The small cabin with its uneven porch, the barn that needed repairs, the fields that wanted tending, and the empty corral awaiting livestock he hadn't yet acquired. It's not much, he said apologetically. Ayana surveyed the homestead with a practical eye. It is a good beginning. The soil looks rich. Water is near. She looked at him. You have built foundation. Now we build rest. Her confidence was both reassuring and intimidating. The first weeks were awkward as they established boundaries and routines. Roderick gave Ayana the small bedroom, while he slept on a pallet in the main room. They worked from sunrise to sunset, repairing, planting, cleaning. She transformed the interior of the cabin with simple touches. Wildflowers in a tin can, a colorful blanket she had brought, dried herbs hanging from the rafters. Ayana proved herself capable of work that would have daunted many frontier women. She helped mend fences, worked alongside him in the fields, and still managed to prepare meals that made his previous cooking seem like prison rations. She started a garden, coaxing vegetables from soil that Roderick had thought too poor to bother with. My mother taught me white ways of gardening, she explained as she worked the earth. My father's people taught me how to read the land, when to plant, what grows together. Slowly, the strangeness of her presence faded. Roderick found himself looking forward to evenings by the fire, when they would talk about their day, or she would sometimes tell stories from her childhood, moving between two cultures, learning to navigate both. One evening, nearly a month after her arrival, Roderick returned from hunting to find Ayana standing in the yard, staring at the horizon with an expression he couldn't read. "Something wrong?" he asked, dismounting with his day's catch. "No," she said, then hesitated. "Sometimes I wonder if I have made mistake. Not for me, for you." Roderick frowned. "What do you mean? You lived alone by choice. Now your quiet is gone. Your space is not only yours." The concern in her voice touched him. "I'm adjusting," he admitted. "But I don't regret our arrangement." She studied his face, searching for truth. "You are not man who speaks many words. But I would know your thoughts sometimes." It was the closest she had come to asking for personal reassurance, and Roderick realized with sudden clarity how vulnerable her position truly was. She had gambled everything on this partnership. "I think," he said carefully, "that my homestead has become more of a home since you arrived." The simple truth seemed to satisfy her. She nodded once and turned to take the rabbits he had caught, but not before he saw relief soften her expression. Their routines continued through summer and into early fall, the partnership solidifying with each passing week. They didn't discuss changing the nature of their arrangement, though Roderick sometimes caught himself watching her as she worked, admiring the grace of her movements, the quiet determination in her face. The first real test of their partnership came unexpectedly. Roderick returned from checking fence lines to find two men on horseback in the yard, their manner and appearance immediately setting him on edge. Ayana stood on the porch, her posture rigid. "Taylor," one of the men called as Roderick approached. "Roderick Taylor?" "That's right." Roderick positioned himself between the strangers and the porch. "Something I can help you with." "Passing through. Heard there was a place to water horses hereabouts." The man's eyes drifted to Ayana. "Didn't realize you had company. Indian company at that." The second man spat into the dust. "Squaw man, huh? Didn't figure you for the type." Roderick felt heat rise in his face. "My wife's heritage is none of your concern. Water's down by the creek. Help yourselves and move on." "Wife?" The first man's eyebrows rose. "That legal in this territory?" "Legal enough," Roderick said flatly. His hand drifted closer to the rifle slung over his saddle. The men exchanged glances, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "No offense meant," the first one said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Just surprised is all." "Creek's that way," Roderick pointed. "Then I suggest you continue on your journey." The men watered their horses, speaking in low tones and casting occasional glances toward the homestead. Roderick remained mounted, watching them until they departed. Only when they had disappeared from view did he dismount and approach Ayana, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. "You called me wife," she said quietly. Roderick hadn't planned to say it. The word had emerged instinctively, a declaration of protection. Seemed simpler than explaining our arrangement. "Yes," she agreed, but her eyes held a question he wasn't ready to answer. That night, they sat across from each other at the table, the incident hanging between them. "Those men," Ayana finally said. "They will tell others what they saw. A white man living with Apache woman. Let them talk. It may bring trouble." Roderick considered this. "Would you prefer to leave? To find another place?" She looked up sharply. "Is that what you want?" "No," he answered truthfully. "That's not what I want." Something shifted in her expression, relief, perhaps, or the beginnings of something deeper. "Then I stay? We face trouble together, if it comes." The tension that had built throughout the day eased. Later, as she prepared for bed, Ayana paused at the door to her small room. "Among my father's people, a man defends what belongs to him," she said softly. "Today, you defended me." Before Roderick could respond, she had disappeared into her room, leaving him to ponder the implications of her words and his own unexpected reaction to the stranger's presence. The incident proved to be a turning point. Something had changed between them, unspoken but undeniable. Roderick found himself noticing the small ways Ayana had integrated herself into his life. The herbs she gathered for his occasional headaches, how she remembered which foods he preferred, the quiet companionship she offered without demand. Fall deepened toward winter. They prepared the homestead together, storing food, repairing the cabin against coming storms, ensuring they had enough firewood to last the cold months. Roderick had always dreaded winter's isolation, but found himself almost looking forward to the quiet evenings ahead. Then came the day that challenged everything they had built. Roderick returned from town, a rare trip for winter supplies, to find the cabin door open, items scattered across the yard. "Ayana," he called, fear clutching at his chest as he dismounted and ran toward the cabin. Inside, furniture had been overturned, their few possessions strewn about. Blood stained the wooden floor near the hearth. Cold terror washed over him. This was why he had chosen solitude, because the frontier took everything eventually, because caring meant vulnerability. A noise from the barn caught his attention. Grabbing his rifle, he approached cautiously. Inside, he found Ayana tending to a wound on her arm, her face pale but composed. "What happened?" he demanded, relief making his voice harsher than intended. "3 men," she answered calmly. "They came looking for you. When you weren't here." She shrugged slightly, wincing at the movement. Fury replaced fear. "Did they hurt you?" "Beyond this." He gestured to her arm. "No. I fought." The faintest smile touched her lips. "My father taught his daughter well. I broke one man's nose before they left." "Why didn't you hide?" "This is my home," she said simply. "I defend what is mine." The words echoed his own thoughts from weeks earlier. "My home. What is mine?" The significance wasn't lost on him. "They took some food. Your father's watch," she continued, "said they would return when you were here." "I know who they are," Roderick realized grimly. "Cutter's gang. They've been raiding homesteads up and down the territory." Ayana nodded. "The short one called another Cutter. Said you crossed them once. Years ago. Refused to let them use my land to hide stolen cattle." He examined her wound. "We need to clean this properly." As he tended to her arm, a decision crystallized in his mind. "We should leave," he said quietly. "They'll be back with more men." Ayana's eyes widened. "Leave our home. Just temporarily. Until the sheriff can organize a posse." He wrapped a clean bandage around her arm. "I won't risk your safety." "And if I choose to stay?" "To fight beside you." Roderick shook his head. "This isn't your fight." "Is it not?" Her voice took on an edge he hadn't heard before. "You said our home. Did you mean those words?" "Of course, but then it is my fight too." She placed her hand over his, stopping his work on the bandage. "Roderick, I did not come here to run at first sign of trouble." He looked into her eyes, determined, fearless, and suddenly so precious to him that the thought of harm coming to her was unbearable. "I can't lose you," he admitted, the words tearing free from some deep place he had kept locked away. "Don't you understand? Everything I've built my life around. Keeping apart, staying unattached, it was to avoid this exact feeling. This fear." Ayana's expression softened. "And has it worked? This life of keeping apart?" He couldn't answer, caught in the truth of her question. "My father told me once," she continued gently, "that fear is poor advisor. We cannot build life around what might be lost, only around what might be gained." The wisdom in her words struck him to the core. What had he gained by his solitude? Safety, perhaps, but at what cost? And what had he gained in these months with Ayana? Purpose, partnership, the beginnings of something that could become far more. "We prepare," he said finally. "Together. If Cutter returns, he'll find more than he bargained for." They spent the next 2 days fortifying the homestead, boarding windows, creating defensive positions, preparing for a siege they hoped wouldn't come. Throughout their work, something shifted between them. The careful distance Roderick had maintained began to dissolve as he acknowledged, at least to himself, how central Ayana had become to his existence. On the 3rd night, as they sat by the fire keeping watch, Ayana broke their companionable silence. "Tell me about the man you were before. The one who decided to live alone." Roderick considered the question, staring into the flames. "My father was a changed man after my mother died. He lived, but stopped living, if that makes sense. I was 14, watching him hollow out day by day until there was nothing left but routine. And this taught you to avoid love. It taught me that loving someone means giving them power to destroy you when they're gone." He looked at her. "My father once told me, never depend on anyone for your happiness, son. The frontier takes everything eventually." Ayana absorbed this. "My people have known great loss. Our lands, our way of life, many of our traditions, taken. Yet still we love. Still we build families." She leaned forward slightly. "Perhaps true strength is not in avoiding pain, but in risking it for something valuable. And what would be valuable enough to risk that pain?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew her answer. Connection, she said simply. Belonging. A hand to hold in darkness. Her eyes met his. I think you know this already, Roderick Taylor. Why else would you have agreed to our partnership? Before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses shattered the quiet night. Cutter had returned, and he hadn't come alone. 6 riders, Roderick murmured, peering through a gap in the boarded window. Armed, Ayana took position at another window, rifle ready. The transformation from thoughtful philosopher to warrior happened in an instant, reminding Roderick of the complexity of the woman who had entered his life. Taylor, a voice called from the darkness. We know you're in there. Come out, and maybe we'll let your squaw live. Roderick's jaw tightened at the slur. Thomas Cutter, he called back. Still hiding behind other men, I see. Not hiding, Taylor. Just being smart. Which is more than I can say for you. Shacking up with an Indian disgraces the memory of everyone who died fighting them. You have 10 seconds to leave my property, Roderick responded. After that, we start shooting. Laughter answered him. You and what army? He has me. Ayana called, her voice strong and clear in the night. I who took your nose, Cutter. Perhaps next time I take your life. A string of curses followed, then the unmistakable sound of men dismounting, spreading out around the cabin. They will try to burn us out, Ayana whispered. Roderick nodded grimly. Stay low. Wait for my signal. The next hours passed in a haze of gunfire and smoke. Cutter's men attempted to approach with torches several times, only to be driven back by precise shooting from the cabin. One man fell, then another. The remaining outlaws became more cautious, but no less determined. As dawn approached, Roderick realized they were running low on ammunition. A bullet had grazed his shoulder, and exhaustion pulled at both of them. We need to end this, he told Ayana during a lull in the firing. They'll wait us out otherwise. She studied him with those perceptive eyes. You have plan. A desperate one. He outlined his thinking quickly. I'll create a distraction out back. While they're focused on me, you slip out through the root cellar and circle around. Too dangerous, she objected immediately. They will kill you. Not if you're in position to prevent it. He gripped her hand. I trust you, Ayana. With my life. Something profound passed between them in that moment. A recognition that transcended their practical partnership. When this is over, she said softly, we have much to discuss. Roderick nodded. When this is over. The plan worked better than either dared hope. Roderick created a convincing distraction, drawing the outlaws' attention while Ayana slipped from the homestead unnoticed. Her skills, learned from her Apache father, allowed her to move silently through the pre-dawn shadows. When Cutter and his remaining men converged on Roderick's position behind the barn, they found themselves suddenly under fire from an unexpected direction. The surprise was complete. Drop your weapons, Ayana commanded, her rifle aimed steadily at Cutter himself. In the confusion, Roderick managed to disarm one man, while the others hesitated, caught between attackers. This ends now, Roderick declared. You're finished, Cutter. What might have been their moment of victory shifted in an instant when Cutter, desperate and enraged, lunged toward Ayana. His hand closed around her rifle barrel, wrenching it sideways as they struggled. Roderick didn't hesitate. He fired, the shot echoing across the homestead. Cutter fell, a look of surprise frozen on his face. The remaining outlaws surrendered quickly after that, all fight gone from them without their leader. As the sun rose fully over the horizon, Roderick bound the men securely, planning to take them to the sheriff when it was safe to leave the homestead. Only when the immediate danger had passed did he turn to Ayana. She stood watching him, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. You risked everything, she said quietly. For me. Yes. The simplicity of his answer seemed to surprise her. They moved toward each other as if drawn by some invisible force. When they stood face to face, Roderick finally allowed himself to voice the truth he had been avoiding for months. I came to town to buy a cow, he said softly. Instead, I found you. And everything I believed about survival in this wilderness has been challenged since that day. What do you believe now? She asked, her amber eyes searching his. That perhaps my father was wrong. That the frontier doesn't take everything eventually. He took her hand gently. That some things, some people, are worth the risk of loss. Ayana's smile illuminated her face. This is what I hoped you would learn. I want to change our arrangement, he continued. Not partners only. Husband and wife, Truly. If you'll have me. I will, she answered simply. I have waited for you to see what I saw from beginning. And what was that? That loneliness is choice, not fate. She reached up to touch his face. That even in harsh places, love grows if permitted. 2 weeks later, they stood before a minister in painted rock, speaking vows that formalized what had already taken root in their hearts. Some townspeople stayed away, uncomfortable with the union. Others came out of curiosity or genuine goodwill. Sheriff Wade, who had arrived with a posse the day after the attack to collect the surviving outlaws, stood as witness alongside Henderson from the general store. Never thought I'd see the day, Henderson whispered to the sheriff. Taylor was the most confirmed bachelor in the territory. Frontier changes a man, the sheriff replied. Sometimes for the better. As they rode back to their homestead that evening, now legally and emotionally husband and wife, Roderick marveled at the transformation of his life in less than a year. Do you regret it? Ayana asked as their home came into view. Coming back with an Apache bride instead of a cow. Roderick laughed. A free, unburdened sound that would have been impossible for the man he had been before meeting her. The cow would have given milk, he answered, reaching across to take her hand. But you gave me a future. Winter settled over their homestead, but inside their small cabin, warmth prevailed. They faced the challenges of frontier life together. Blizzards that isolated them for weeks, occasional hostility from prejudiced neighbors, the constant work of building a life from unforgiving land. Yet in the evenings, as they sat before their fire, Roderick often thought of how narrowly he had missed this happiness, how close he had come to spending his life alone, convinced that isolation was the price of survival. What are you thinking? Ayana asked one such night, her head resting against his shoulder. That I was wrong, he answered honestly. The West isn't just a place of loss and hardship. It's also a place where different paths cross, where new beginnings are possible, and where a man who went to buy a cow, she added with a smile, might instead find everything he never knew he needed. Roderick pulled her closer, marveling at the truth of it. He had sought only to survive the frontier. Instead, with Ayana, he had learned to truly live in it.